Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey, your literary happy hour, the show where we read the coffee grounds and drink all the whiskey, and not always in that order. I'm your host, William. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey, your literary happy hour, the show where we read the coffee grounds and drink all the whiskey, and not always in that order. I'm your host, William R. Hincy, and I am delighted and pleased as punch today to have author Niles Reddick with me. Niles, welcome to the Whiskey Bar.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is awesome. I was really excited to have you on the show. So let me give you the brief intro here, and I'm sure there's going to be about 19 things I forget. So if you want to add anything or feel free. But so you've had your works appeared in 17 different collections, featured in over 300 different literary magazines and journals across the world. And I think the website said over 21 countries, if I noted it right. And maybe it's changed since the website was changed. You've been a nominated finalist for countless awards. Your novel, Drifting Too Far from the Shore, was nominated for a Forward Award, a Penn Faulkner Award, and a Pulitzer. You got your bachelor's. I always like the life thing, so I always make a note of these. You got your bachelor's in philosophy, a master's in psychology, and then you studied parapsychology with William Roll and the author Brendan Moody. And then you ended up getting your PhD with the emphasis, if I can say the word, emphasis, in literature and psychology. Anything I missed?
That's fine.
Okay. The bullet points, and they're literally bullet points on my paper here. So
it took a long time to get all those degrees, I can tell you that. And a lot of student loans, which I paid off, thank gosh.
Oh, very good. Very good. Great. So then I'm wondering then maybe you could just, I'd like to kind of start if you could just maybe just kind of tell us about your, author journey kind of, or just life journey leading up to today.
Yeah, I think I started writing in high school, not very serious at all. Probably got more serious in college, and then in graduate school, I wrote 2 novels or 3 novels in graduate school. They were never published. They literally were awful. Just, I'd forgotten about one of them altogether. And I read it. I found it in a box, and I read it just last year. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote this trash. But it is a long journey. And unlike a lot of writers, I didn't really study creative writing, as an undergrad. I did journalistic writing really in college for the newspaper, and then just kind of introspectively wanted to write and do stories. And so I didn't publish a story until the early 90s. So probably 30 years now. I've been doing stories, and I try to do a story a week. At least in the past few years, I've done a story a week, and I do get up very early, like 3 a.m, and that's when I do it. And then I would come to work all day, of course, and not be able to get anything done. And sometimes work on the weekend to get, to send submissions out and so forth. But sure. I think today I've published 600 stories, and you're reminding me that I need to update that website. It's a living thing, right? It's a living document, and I need to keep that updated. And I have a lot of other things I've updated, but I forget about that one. And it's really cool for me, at least, to have wanted to be a writer at some point in my later in my college years or university years, and then finally see that come to fruition many, many years later. I studied with a lot of known writers and poets, believe it or not. David Kirby is a very well-known poet and writes I love his work. I studied with him. I studied with a guy named Jerome Stern from New York, who was at Florida State when I was in Florida State. And he wrote the book called Making Shapely Fiction, which is an excellent fiction book for writers. Highly recommended. It's still in print. Dr. Stern passed away several years ago, but his book is still in print. And I've just been very fortunate to have some what I think are mentors. I think every writer needs a mentor. I still have plenty of friends who are writers, who are mentors, and are helpful in different ways, in my journey. And I try to help people as much as I possibly can too. But it is a great experience, and I love creating stories. And not all of them are good. And I always find this fascinating, Bill, because I will send out a story. My kind of process is, I draft it and then I go back later and edit it. Sometimes I read it to my wife. Most of the stories I read to her. She says, "Oh, I like this. I don't like this," or whatever. And it makes me think about it maybe a little deeper. And then I go back and edit. And so I'll do that a few times, edit before I submit. And then when I submit, I may submit it to 5 or 8 journals or magazines. And, they take a while sometimes to respond. I'm a reader for The Pinch, which is at the University of Memphis. And, I get just a ton of these submissions that I have to kind of read and just react to very quickly. And so you never know. Sometimes it gets picked up. I have had stories get picked up the first time I sent it out to the first journal I sent it out. Then, I think my record is like 45 rejections on one story before it finally gets picked up. And I don't know that the magazine that picked up the first story the first time and the one that picked it up the 46th time, I don't know that one story is necessarily better than the other story. I think it's just the way that all of that works. It's a very cumbersome process. And the business of writing, the business of creating, it is fun. And you feel good about your story and you love your characters and whatever. But going through all those rejections, and it was hard in the very beginning, but it's become kind of old hat for me to get rejections, and I don't feel anything anymore. I feel like maybe I'm become a serial killer or something.
Get inside from the
I
rejection.
don't have any emotions about it anymore. It's just kind of like, I don't know, washing your hands or something.
Yeah, no, I feel you, because it's kind of that way with, when you start your mouth and you get this idea like, oh, I want to win an award or something, right? And then if you're lucky enough to win one or so, then at some point you realize like, oh, well, you know what? Being nominated, being a finalist is just as good. I think the last one, I forget, Southeastern Book Festival or something, like, I won some category on there. And I mean, it's just like, okay. And then I was a finalist for some other award. And I'm like, it's not just as good. And then you kind of forget about it. It's kind of with the rejection too. It's like, I was rejected.
Yeah, I forget about that stuff,
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's not a lot of money to be made in writing stories, at least.
Sure.
Journals don't really, a lot of them, it's just a labor of love. They don't pay. The ones that do pay, you can't get in. Or if you get in, if you're lucky enough to get in one, like I got in the Saturday Evening Post, and then had one of the top stories for that year. It's been a few years. And, I may have made $50 or $100. I don't remember, but it wasn't much. And the big ones, you can't seem to get in. I don't think it has anything to do with the writing that's good or not good. I think it just has to do with they're getting thousands and thousands of submissions from people all over, including people like, say, a Stephen King or Salman Rushdie or some of these folks who are best-selling millionaires from some of their books, and they're getting in there, but they have that name recognition.
Sure. And well, I'm sure they want to lean towards that too, because now if you're whatever magazine and you have Stephen King, well, then you get to promote Stephen King stories.
Absolutely. And that helps sell the magazines, Niles Reddick is probably not going to help sell any magazines.
Yeah.
The people I know can't even read, you know. I shouldn't say that. That's not true. But
Right.
I like to say that.
Yeah, it's fair.
People, I don't think people read. A lot of people don't read.
Right.
And I think that's sad because, you know, reading, at least to me as a kid, that's probably what did it for me. You know, I loved reading stories and books as a kid and even as a teenager and even in college when we had to read all of these books.
Yeah.
I enjoyed every bit of it.
Right, sure. Well, you know, it's funny. I've talked to a lot of people that loved reading as a kid and teenager, and it was college that turned them off to it because they had to read so much.
Yeah.
And then like my wife's a nurse, but she's going, she has her master's in nursing and she's getting her PhD now. And there's so much reading and writing that she used to read and things, but now it's like she hates writing. It's like physically killing her all the time because, you know, working on your dissertation and things is such a massive project. And
that is a turnoff. It is most definitely a turnoff. I'll never forget it, and it actually left a scar. And I've never written a story about this. Probably should have. But you know, we had to do with our PhD. We had to do 2 languages. We had to pass 2 foreign languages. Not we didn't have to speak them necessarily, but we had to be able to translate. This is really a holdover, you know, from some earlier generation of PhDs. But anyway, I did Italian and French. I'm sure I barely passed them. I mean, I think the professors just felt sorry for me.
Sure.
And, you know, it's a pass-fail thing. It's not a grade. And then every year I wake up at least once a year with this nightmare of that I failed the Spanish exam and I'm not going to get my doctoral degree. And I wake up freaked out and sweaty and whatever. And the irony is I never even took Spanish. I never took the Spanish exam. It was French and Italian. So I don't know why I had that dream every year.
Sure.
So I should write about that. But your wife's absolutely right. It's a turnoff and it is a negative. It's a lot of work. You know, it really, you know, it takes a year at least. I think for me, it was just 1 year. Some people, it takes longer than that.
Right.
Depends on how much they do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I believe it. Especially if you're not, I liked the classics. So when I was going to school and things, it wasn't such a chore. Sometimes the amount of reading to do for the next week was the chore. But at least it was like things I generally liked. But if you don't like Faulkner, and then now you're given a Faulkner book, and then the notion of reading a Faulkner book in 1 week and talking about it the next week is insanity to me. There's probably people smart enough to do it. I'm not. Like, I can't enjoy this because I can't sit and kind of dwell on it, and it's not really meant for fast consumption.
And Faulkner was you know, of course, I'm from the South, and I think people think I probably relate more to Southern writers. I don't know that that's true. I had a hard time with Faulkner personally, and I know the Faulkner family. I've been to Roanoke, I've been to Oxford and all that, but I just had a tough time. He was an incredible writer, and you know that I remember reading one of the novels. I don't remember. I took a whole class on Faulkner, so we had to read everything he'd ever written in that one semester. And I remember reading one of the books. I don't remember now which one. And at the end of the page, he still had not stopped that sentence.
Right.
And it was like I was gasping for air to try to get through this sentence. And at the end of the page, I had to go back. I don't even know what he had written. I had to go back and reread it. And that was probably the frustrating thing for me, because I think I have probably ADD or ADHD or one of those. And I have a short attention span. And so I jump around a lot and it drives people crazy. But I could not follow that long, difficult prose. You know, it just drove me nuts.
After. Yeah, no, I feel you. I like one of my favorite things the authors to rag on, because I'll never talk bad about writers that are alive, because I know how hard it is and I know they're trying. And so some of it's just not for me, but if you've already passed away, I feel pretty fine like talking. So,
Right.
James Joyce is the one that just drives me nuts. I just feel like he's just trolled the world. I read it was local here, I think Long Beach, where there was a group that got together to read Finnegan's Wake, and they were doing. I think they said that I don't think it might have been as low as like a page a week. It was like I think it literally was like a page a week they were going through, and it took them like 25 years to go through all of it. Wow. And they're asking them at the end, so what did you have this great appreciation? And they're like, no, I'm just glad it's over.
Yeah. I think my best class ever was a class, a graduate class at Florida State on Cervantes. And we read everything he had written, including Don Quixote. But the guy that taught that, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but anyway, the guy that taught that was a scholar and knew all of these details. And it was just fascinating to me to get all of that information from him.
Yeah, right, sure. So is there a reason? So, because I know you said you started with the two novels that are just, in the garage or something now. So did you start with writing novels and transition to mostly short stories, or?
I did.
Yeah,
I absolutely did. I started with at least 3 novels that I had written, and I finished them and sent them out like a fool. And, just got all of these rejections over, say, a couple of years, and kind of backed off a little bit. And then this friend of mine who actually is a friend today, but he was a student at some point, but he was an older student.
Yeah.
He said to me, the stories that you told in class were the stories you should write. And so I thought, I should do this. And so I was invited to speak at a writers' festival. And this writer who was there, I think from Indiana or Illinois, Elaine Fowler Palencia, who was just a wonderful story writer. And Elaine said to me, because I got up and read a couple of stories, and she said, you really need to put together a book of these stories. These are great stories. And so she kind of steered me to do the first collection, which was titled Roadkill Art and Other Oddities. And, that first story, Roadkill Art, was the first story I published. And I think it's been published 4 or 5 times in different magazines and anthologies and what have you. And of course, there's the lead story in that first collection I did. And mostly those were about family. The roadkill story was really about my aunt, who really did collect roadkill and make art. And I just came from this big eccentric Southern family, and had on the one side, that was my dad's sister. They were eccentric in some ways. And then my mother's family, on the other side, were fairly good moonshiners around the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia, where they had stills on islands in the Okefenokee that the revenuers wouldn't go out and bust them because they were scared of the gators and snakes.
Sure.
And but they never made a lot of money moonshining because they mostly drank it. But there were all of these stories that I would hear from different family through the years. And that's how I really started writing, was making up stories about family. They're all embellished, of course.
Sure.
But people loved hearing that stuff. Not many people have an aunt who collected roadkill and made art.
Right.
She was a wonder. I loved her. She was wonderful. I miss her.
Yeah, sure. Well, or have stills out in in the swamps that are protected by gators and snakes. That's fun stuff for sure. So, whenever we take a step back, because I did want to talk a little, like, so you got your bachelor's in philosophy. And so I wonder generally, like, what drew you to start off with philosophy here as far as your area of study? And then how did the study of philosophy, did that change your kind of worldview, like your perspective of life in any way?
Oh my gosh, yes. I did a philosophy undergrad degree and a minor in religion and sociology. But I took my first philosophy class was with the guy who his name was Ron Barnett. He was from California, and he was just the coolest person. He had been roommates with Steve Martin in California, and they used to do comedy. And they even did laugh-in skits. They wrote some of the laugh-in, and they traveled up and down the coast doing comedy. So he was a character. And I just gravitated to every class that he taught because, first of all, he was this genius. But on the other hand, he was just a deep critical thinker and just lifted me out of my little world that I had come up in. And I learned all of these new ideas and ways of thinking about the world that were so different from the way that I was brought up. And it was challenging, but I loved thinking that way and changing my direction. And, reading people like the existentialists like Sartre or Camus, and they were great writers, right? And then reading the Greeks, I read all of the Greeks and, of course, Plato and Aristotle and all of them. And then even some of the humorous writers like Aristophanes. And I think it really did influence me to think about life in a different way and also to see the humor in life, And so I have a very dry sense of humor. And so I often write things that I think are humorous. People don't like it. They don't find it very funny at all. They don't see the humor in it. And so I get a kick out of it sometimes,
Right.
But
yeah,
I mean, every person's different, obviously. So
yeah, that happened.
But that's how I really got started. And then for me to go on and study really humanistic psychology, I was a student of Jung. Carl Jung had a graduate student who I studied with. I studied with two of Abraham Maslow's proteges, then Raymond Moody, of course, who wrote all the near-death experience stuff, and also Bill Roll, who had written all of these haunting things, which was just wow to have all of these different minds influence me. I even went on some haunting expeditions and had just the blast. I wrote a CNF piece titled All Will Be Well, because I woke up in the night about 3-4 months ago and I knew something was in the room. And I looked over toward the window and I saw this arm and hand that was just glowing. It was like energy.
Wow.
And I don't believe I've ever seen anything like that. And it was amazing to me. And yet I felt this sense of peace that all would be well. That's what the kind of message was. And I don't know if it was an angel or alien or who knows what it was. Right. And I wrote this piece about it, which it's not published yet, but it'll get published. They all get published. It's just a matter of where they will get published.
All right.
And it's a great piece, but I dredged up some of that stuff from Bill Roll and Raymond Moody that had impacted me, and some of the haunting expeditions that I had been on, which were really the most boring things people think that's exciting, but it's really not that exciting. You don't get to see what these people say they had seen, Right. They don't show up, for me anyway.
Right.
But it was an incredible time in my life, and I'm glad to have been able to study with those folks.
Sure. So I wonder, because with near-death experiences and things, you tend to get people that believe like you're witnessing the afterlife, and then the more materialistic camp is kind of it's all a product of the mind. I wonder with your study, since you did so much study of the mind with philosophy and psychology, and then you did the parapsychology, what do you think? Do you have any opinions on that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I personally think that there is something there. This book, the one I just did, which is a novella titled Forgiven, you can see the tunnel and the light and the souls, going to the light. And this is a story about a guy who goes to prison for murder, for drugs, and then gets a second chance. He gets an early release, and I don't want to give it all away, but, he's in a Florida prison with Ted Bundy. And so there's some conversations with Bundy. Then he gets out and he has a new life. And, but at some point he had a near-death experience. And so I describe that in a way that I think indicates that there are too many anecdotal examples of people who have had experiences. And then there are experiences with people who get information that they couldn't have known otherwise. Mm-hmm. And so there must be something there. Sure. And I do believe there's something out there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you too. I've always thought the strangest thing, and I've had a few guests, like the last person I recorded with was Linda Zimmerman. She was in Hudson Valley. There was the famous UFO flap there, and I think it's the 80s, early to mid 80s. But she's done, a bunch of ghosts, and she's kind of the same. She she went with ghost hunts and things, so like basically nothing kind of happens, right? But one of the things we're talking about is how you have to really devalue what people tell you to not think that there's more going on, right? I've always thought all these people say they have these experiences, and sure, some of them you could explain away. I can explain away things I've done, and that makes a lot of sense. And maybe it was this thing, but there's a lot that fall into this. No, that doesn't make any sense with the purely everything's material, and you can explain everything with that.
I'm familiar with those Hudson Valley experiences. I mean, there are some incredible UFO encounters and experiences going back, to the beginnings of America, really. Sure. And they're fascinating. I have to think there's something out there. Mm-hmm. Or here already.
Right, really.
That we don't know.
Right. Well, it's funny how the attitudes have changed now that the government's come out with some like the Tic Tac, the Nimitz, all these footage. And now people are like, oh, yeah, there probably is UFOs. And I remember just like 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more before the New York Times article and everything kind of blew open, where if I mentioned that, people are like, you're a kook and what?
Yeah. Hey, I worked at a military base in college. And one of the security officers told me, I asked him one night because I had seen one. And I asked him, are they ours or are they some? And he looked at me for a while and he didn't say anything. And he said, both. And I said, how do you know that? Are they here on this base? And he said, no, they're not on this base. But he had been in California. I think it was Edwards Air Force Base in California. I don't even know where that is.
I grew up by Edwards Air Force Base. I have a little town called Palmdale, Valley. My dad worked. My dad was an aerospace engineer, so he went out to Edwards quite a bit. So yeah, I know exactly where Edwards is.
Well, he told me the story, and now I believe he was telling me the truth. But he said they would patrol. They would go up on a hill overlooking the runway at Edwards, and that at a certain point in the middle of the night, the runway would open, and shoop, 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 out they came.
Wow, that's crazy.
And he said those are ours, and then there are others that are not. So it goes back to all the technology, that they got from the crashes at Roswell and the crash in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and then others that were,
Sure.
there's multiple, crashes that have occurred that they supposedly collected and then back engineered all of that. I don't know how true that is. And I don't know if he was telling me the truth or if he was just making it up, but it certainly caught my imagination.
Sure.
I ran with it.
Right. So funny. I didn't think we were going to go down a UFO rabbit hole here, but now that you mentioned you saw one, I'm really curious. Do you mind telling us about it?
Yeah, it was, I was on my way to the base actually. And I was driving down a 2-lane road in the city and saw it hovering over a church, actually. Just a little country kind of Presbyterian church. And I don't think it had anything to do with the church or the religion or anything. I think it was just there hovering. And I pulled over and I had a 35 millimeter camera, but I'd left it at home and it wasn't in my car. And I got out and, stood there and just watched the lights going round and round. And then it just, after just a couple of minutes, it just went up and kind of disappeared. And, there was no missing time. I wasn't abducted. I would love to have been abducted and, have something inserted under my arm or something. But, nothing happened. And for a while I was depressed. I thought, why didn't they want to take me? What is it about me that they didn't want, or something? But it's kind of worse than like the girl saying she's not going with you to prom or something.
Oh, no, sure. That's the rejection that hurt. Yeah, all those book rejection, like whatever, it's a story, but the alien's not taking you. That one hurts. I can feel you. That's funny. My dad was for most of his career, he was like, he could talk about it. It wasn't top secret or anything. So like he worked on some of the early drones, the surveillance ones. When we first started doing that, many moons ago, and I did satellites before that, but he ended his career with a top secret clearance. And actually, if you've seen where, I'm going to blank on the name, I think it's Plant 42, but where like when they unveiled the B2 and it comes out of the hangar. So that's by Sierra Highway. So like where I grew up, like we would use Sierra Highway all the time. You just look over at the building, and that's exactly where it reeled out. If you're on Sierra Highway, you would just see it, reel out. And so he was working there with the top secret. That's what I used to always just tell him, like, I just assume it's back engineering alien spacecraft. So, you don't have to tell me. I already know because it's top secret, Dad, So very good. So I'm just trying to look through my notes here since we went on, and I'm very happy to go down rabbit holes. So that's cool, especially when they're
That's a lot of fun. That stuff.
Did you ever witness them besides the UFOs when you did the ghost, and then the NDA, stuff like that? Did you ever witness anything inexplicable, or was it all pretty just kind of run of the mill?
No, it was run of the mill, and I never personally. I mean, Dr. Roll, I know he was the one who investigated the Amityville case and wrote about that. He did the Queen Mary ship in I think Los Angeles. I don't remember.
Long Beach. Yeah, I mean,
is it Long Beach? Okay.
Yeah, it's right here, Long Beach.
He did that. He did the ship. He did some very famous cases. He was on Unsolved Mysteries a lot.
Oh, I must have seen him then because I loved Unsolved Mysteries.
You probably did. And you probably saw Raymond Moody on there as well. He was an incredible mind. He had both a PhD in philosophy as well as an MD. And he had interviewed hundreds of people about near-death experiences. And I think he truly believed there was something beyond that we couldn't, on the other side of the veil or whatever, that we couldn't quite get to in our physical forms. But he was convinced, I think, from his interviews that there was something that these people were not just making it up.
Sure.
Unfortunately, and I didn't do that alone. There were a group of us that went on some expeditions together. And we just never did. We recorded the stories from the people, you know, and we went because those faculty members were too busy, you know, to go and do it. And we wanted to get the data and see what we could find out, but we really never did experience anything like they did.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. And then, so I wondered then too, so because I know from the website, I think you have 3 kids.
I have what?
3 kids? 2 kids?
Oh, two.
Okay, I'm trying to remember that you had a couple of pictures on there. So there's probably 3 other people with you, counting your wife.
Yeah.
Where my mathematics has gone wrong for me. So I wonder then. So you studied, philosophy. You study psychology. Some parapsychology too, like we've been talking about. How does that compare to when especially the mind stuff with psychology and stuff? How does that compare to when you actually had kids and were in charge with rearing these?
I don't think it really did any good at all. I didn't.
Right.
I mean, I'm very fortunate to have a daughter who's in the University of Tennessee studying architecture. And then my son is going to Carson Newman University this fall to study business. So neither one of them, interestingly, went the humanities route, and I never tried to force them. Neither one of them liked writing. My daughter kind of used to like to read, but my son can't stand to read. It's really interesting. My wife is a human resources manager, so she reads more actually than I do. But she's a pleasure reader, not reading literary stuff necessarily. But it's really interesting how they turn out, totally different than what you would think. It's really quite amazing.
Sure. I had on author Michael Branch. He's a like creative nonfiction humorist. I think he teaches at the University of Nevada, but he was out and he explained it as nothing. How did he say it? Nothing destroys adult pretension like kids. Like you think like kids. And you're like, okay, whatever. And I think that's part of their role.
I've written a lot about them. Through the years. They don't know it in some cases. In some cases, they do know it. I've written a lot about my wife. I've written a lot about all of my family. And I don't know if I think at some level they get a kick out of it that, I've done this story and incorporated them into it. But usually, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's embellished quite a bit and not 100% true. Here's my drink.
I don't know.
This is pink sparkling ice. Doesn't that just look? It's kiwi strawberry, and it's delicious. But I love these because they're carbonated, but they also have some vitamins and antioxidants in it. So this is about my only health thing I'm partaking of at this point, anyway.
All right. Very good. Yeah, it's funny, especially early on, with the show titled Writers Drinking Whiskey. So in most shows, usually people are making a drink or we'll have a few drinks. But the last few of either I've recorded them very early, and even like it's, this bar here full of whiskey, so clearly I like the sauce. But record at like 9 a.m. I'm like, man, okay, we do 9 a.m. We're going to be drinking coffee. And sometimes people don't drink for whatever reason. So I usually don't drink if they don't. And
of course, I'm at my office at the university, so I can't have a drink here.
Very good. So awesome then. So I think it would be a fun time then to move over to kind of the more of the writing talk here. I get that right? What if I was just really interested in the title of it for one. I wonder if you could tell us about that.
Yeah, and I used primarily Southern writers in that. In fact, I used Lee Smith, Clyde Edgerton, and Janice Doherty, who is a Georgia writer. Lee and Clyde both are in North Carolina. And I interviewed each of them in a way to support the ideas that I had come up with respect to their novels. So to me, and I have not looked at that in a long time, but I believe my argument was that, these different eccentric characters kind of propel the narrative because it's mysterious. And that's what drives. And I used a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn, 1974. I can't believe I remember this, where he talked about in order to reach scientific discovery, you have an experiment with the anomaly outside of the paradigm. And in order to reach success and discovery, you have to incorporate the anomaly into it. And I use that as kind of an analogy to how the novel structure works in some of these Southern writers' techniques. And I used a bunch. I used Faulkner, Welty, Flannery O'Connor, and of course, Harper Lee with To Kill a Mockingbird, with Boo Radley, and he really does skirt the line, I think, between what is eccentric and what is grotesque, and that's just a social scale of deviancy. And the more positive character would be eccentric, whereas the more deviant character would be kind of grotesque or anti-hero in some cases. So anyway, I used all of that to come up with this idea about the writing process and how those characters function.
Yeah. Oh, very good.
I can't believe I can answer that after all these years. And I may have made it up. I don't know. It may not have. My dissertation may not have read that way at all. But it's funny, Bill, because when you start out doing something like that and you think it's a good idea and you've got faculty members, I had Ann Rowe, who was a Southern literature faculty member at Florida State, David Kirby, who, of course, was a poet, but also a 19th century American scholar. And then Dr. Dunham was psychology. I had to have an outside member. And then David Darst was a Spanish professor who was on there. I really majored in world literature and then did kind of these American and Southern as my secondary areas. I took Russian lit, Greek lit, Roman lit, you name it lit. And learned a lot. Learned a lot about writing, but they really did guide me through the process and thought it was a great work, but nothing ever came of that. I mean, I don't think anybody reads those things.
Right, sure. It's funny, I mentioned before my wife going for a PhD when she got her master's, and they had the PhD students and master's students graduate at the same time. And all of the titles were at least like 16 words long. So I've been hounding her. I'm like, your title's not long enough. Like it needs like at 12 words. You need another 4 to 8 words on this. But yours is just like a nice 4 words.
It was. I tried to keep it simple. And the only way that I got through that was I committed to write 2 pages a day. And then at the end of the day, if I wrote 3 pages, then the next day I wrote 1 page or, whatever. I just kept it at 2 pages a day. And it took a year really to get through all of that.
Sure. I believe it. What do you think, especially when I was in college and things, we talked about, and I still talk about this, because maybe I just, I'm still a college kid at heart. Like the search for truth and beauty. Like, is that still something that resonates today, or is that just kind of gone to like the quaint, No,
I think it is very much alive. I read every day, and what I read is not published fiction necessarily in book form. I'm a member of multiple groups, writing groups, and on social media. And so I read stories in magazines and journals every day by writers, many of whom I know. And, I just read a bunch of stuff today by 3 or 4 writers. One is in Argentina, one is in California, and I can't remember where the other one was. And I read all of these stories, and I just wrote to them and said, "This is beautiful," and so I think it's their way of seeing, their way of experiencing the world, and the way that they describe it. I wouldn't have done it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yet it was beautiful writing. They're all great writers, in publishing a lot, and it's inspiring to me because it gives me a sense of, I should go and, write about this same subject in a different way. I would see it differently. I would describe it differently.
Yeah.
But I find it inspiring, oftentimes very inspiring. But no, I think that's very much alive. I don't think you have to go far to look for people who were hitting it,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of sad is that, I think, I always joke, because if you go somewhere and you tell them you're a writer, they go, "Oh, what have you written?" And there are people that don't read, right?
Yeah.
It's like they know, and you have to have written a movie or something. They can say, "I wrote this movie," and then they would know. Otherwise, there's 3 authors that are truly famous, right? Like you say, Stephen King. Most people know that right away. J.K. Rowling through the Harry Potter, blowing, but you start getting after that list dwindles, pretty quick to who's actually kind of a celebrity, in a true sense. But it's sad because there's so many masters still. There's so many great writers out there, and it's just that getting the spotlight on them, getting it out. So
there are a lot of great writers out there, and to me, and I think Stephen King is a great writer. Actually, he's written a lot of kind of horror stuff, and I don't write that kind of stuff. And I find I've watched his movies, and then I can't sleep, or something.
Right.
And but I think he's a great writer, and he wrote a book called On Writing, which is a process book, and I've read that, and I've used it in class. It's an incredible book, and so I think learning from the masters really is a good thing. And there are others out there, that are very good and will survive time. I don't know about me. And there's a lot younger writers who I think if they can produce as much as some of us have produced, then they could really survive. You had Matthew on. I think that's how we connected. Mm-hmm. And Matthew, I think, is a great writer, and multi-talented. Some people, I'm mainly stories, novellas. I'm not writing poetry. And I'm not writing children's book, but, Matthew's one of those that just crosses genres and does all of this stuff. And I admire that. I think I would love to do film, but I don't think I've got that in me.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's a similar toolkit, but how you apply those things can be so much different, from film to, short stories to novels to, children's books, to, poetry, etc. So, it is cool when you get people like, Matthew and things who's been on the show. I'll link it on here, Matthew Kaye. But super great guy, and great writer. So, very good. So I wonder then, you started with novellas and then you moved to, or novels, and you moved to the short stories. Is there a particular reason the short story formed, in particular, kind of calls out to you?
I think it works because that's the way my mind works. I can do a novella, and I could write a lot very quickly, and maybe not edit a lot, but the short pieces are just, I was on the Pat Conroy Zoom the other day, and Jonathan, who runs the Pat Conroy Center, said you had this incredible knack of letting us parachute into a world and seeing all of this very quickly, and whether it's a sci-fi piece, I don't do a lot of sci-fi, but I do a lot of literary stuff. And then sometimes they're very well organized as far as narrative is concerned, and other times they're not. One thing that I got out of Cervantes was this whole idea of nesting, or a story within a story. I'll start a story and it kind of swirls in my mind, and then I'll link maybe 1, 2, 3 other brief stories or memories into this story. And so by the end of 2 pages, you're just like, whoa, what in the world where did he just take me? I don't do that a lot, but I think those are the best ones that I write. They're also hard to get published because I think editors are just like me. They're reading very quickly and trying to pick these stories. When I'm reading for The Pinch or reading for some other magazine, I read for some other journals too. You're given, 2 or 3 things and you have to pick one. Well, not 2 or 3, 30 or 40, and You've got to pick one that will fit. There's just not enough places out there for people to get everything published. It's only people like me who just have this insane ability to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. I mean, I am a stubborn, hard-headed individual, and I just do not give up. There's no telling how many. I told somebody the other day, I know this because of Submittable. I love Submittable. Submittable tracks all that stuff. One journal, I'm not going to say which one, has rejected probably 85 stories of mine. Mm-hmm. And I'm just enough an annoying cuss of a person that I will continue to send something until they accept it. And then I'll leave them alone and I'll never send them anything else. But I'm just determined that I'm going to land in there at some point.
I'm sure. That's like, did you ever see the show King of the Hill?
Yeah.
The animated show. But the one episode always stands out to me, and I've used this as an example even for the kids, is that Boomhauser was the character, and Bobby's the main character at. And Bobby wants to get like a girlfriend, and Boomhauser always has some new girl he's dating. And okay, I'm going to show you how to get a girlfriend. And they go to the women's shoe store, and he literally goes up to every girl and basically asks her for her number, right? So he's going, and almost all of them are rejecting him. Yeah. And Bobby's sitting there, he's watching. And finally, one of them says yes, and he goes, "Look, that's how you get girls." He's like, "You just keep going." And hey, keep trying.
That's right. That's right.
Beating down those doors, So, awesome. So, what else did I want to bring? Oh, so I wanted to talk a little bit, because we've talked so much about like literature, short stories, kind of the past and present of writing. What do you think the future looks like? There's like AI or all these things. I've heard Netflix is talking about low content shows where it's meant to be background noise for you. Like, where do you think writing goes, and where do you think us writers go?
I'm not a good Tiresias character, from Greek literature, who was a seer, right? A blind prophet seer. When people told me about the internet, this thing was coming, I said, that's a bunch of crap.
That'll never take off.
So I can't believe I'm admitting that, and you're recording it. But the truth is that I don't often see what that future might look like. Maybe it's because I don't want to see it, but AI, I'm already seeing this, in classes. AI, I haven't seen it in my classes per se, but have dealt with other faculty members who are seeing a lot of AI cheating. I was administrative and only teaching maybe one class a year, 1 to 2 classes a year. And my classes were upper division. I occasionally taught a freshman composition or something, but they're really they're struggling with that. And of course, they run it through all of these plagiarism devices and so forth to try to catch that. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I worry about that. And I worry about from my rights with the stories, I worry about how that's going to get taken away at some point, and utilized. I don't know. I don't send stories to magazines and journals that claim your rights forever. There are some out there that will do that. And I don't know why that bothers me, but I don't want that to happen. But yeah, I do think there's an issue there. And I think it could be, it's not going to give writers jobs. That's for sure. And we're not going to make any more money. And that's sad. I mean, that should be our responsibility to lead those efforts, but I don't think it'll happen that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just that had on Ken Lewis, a sci-fi writer, and he did corporate law. He was a lawyer and he was also a software engineer before all of it. And we had talked about AI and one of the things I've always seen especially the current kind of stuff is if you write kind of boilerplate kind of things, if it's I think the example he used was there was the old Dungeons and Dragons story.
Yeah.
As always, it's very formulaic, maybe I hate throwing out genres, then people always think I'm taking on the genre, but you could kind of take your pick genre and say kind of the C+ kind of stuff. That's just, pumping out content kind of stuff. That I think, it is going to be hard. For writers, it's going to be hard to kind of do that stuff to where you're strictly, trying to hit a formula. And the question is, how well do you do it? Because when you're trying to optimize, computers tend to be better. We can optimize the computer and the AI will be better. I'd have my doubts about how well it'll ever be about creating things new. I think there's an assumption that technology always just goes. But especially, you can look through history, it's not true. We were on the moon, how many years ago now? It was in the 60s. You haven't been back. We're talking about it. So it's not this linear thing, and it's not always, we don't know exactly how they built the pyramids, right? They're still figuring it out. So, the Egyptians forgot how they built these massive things. So I don't know that it'll ever get good enough that it can really, I like the term bleed. Right, it's never going to bleed for it because it doesn't have those emotions that go into it.
Right, and the memories, it can't,
right.
The individual experience, human experience in the memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I don't know how it'll go. Ken had a really cool thought that he's what would really be neat is instead of trying to replace writers with if you could turn it into an assistant basically. That helps you so that, hey, this character's eyes color were blue, at the beginning of your book, and you just describe them as brown, right? These simple mistakes we can make, but hopefully an editor catches. Well, there's no reason you can teach a computer to kind of do things like that, but to help people be creative, let people be the creative ones, and then you help.
Yeah, I kind of see it like WordPerfect. I grew up with WordPerfect, and when that kind of went away and we had to transition to Word, I was really upset. I didn't want to go use Word. And then I hated when it underlined things. And I still hate that because they're wrong. Right. That's not a perfect system.
No.
And students rely on that. They believe, and I tell them it's not a perfect system. Don't rely on this stuff.
Right.
Come up with your own ideas. That's what your brain is for,
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Especially the grammar stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah.
I tend to, it's nice. to help you catch, when you misspelled something or, use the wrong form. Some of them do a decent job with that. You just have to double check it. But you have to make sure you add the dictionary and all these things because, I don't know what dictionary it uses, but it's not the best. But it's cool. I think I always tried to tell my kids, I used to never I was never much against cussing and things. Although my son at one point was cussing like a sailor and we did have to have a talk. But I used to just tell them words are tools. You use the right one for the job. So if every time you talk, you're using an F-bomb on it, you're using a hammer a lot, on things that don't need a hammer, and I think, spell check, AI, whatever it might be, it's a tool, but it doesn't mean it does the job for you. You still need to be the handyman here. You need to be.
That's exactly right.
Figure it out. Awesome. So, one of my favorite portions of the show before we get to the reading here, I like to call it shot. I know we're drinking pink water today, and I have water and some coffee here. There we go. So it's just rapid fire questions. So you gotta give me your first thoughts on them, and then we'll get to the reading here and call it a show. So, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Very good. So, first question: worst question you've ever been asked in an interview, and what should I have asked instead?
Worst question I've ever been asked in an interview. It wasn't a question so much as it was a statement. I did an interview for a position in the Northeast, and it was via, I don't even think we had Zoom. I think it may have been a phone interview. And, being the consummate Southerner and not being able to ever really escape that accent that I have, I made the mistake of asking them at the end of the interview, or making a statement. I made a statement and I said, I hope that you were able to understand, everything I said. And they said, why, yes, Dr. Reddick, we listen to country music in the Northeast. And I never thought of myself really as a country. In fact, initially I didn't like country. I didn't grow up listening to country. Yeah. I grew up listening to alternative rock, like REM, or back in the day,
sure,
or ELO, or some of that, Pink Floyd, those kinds of things. So I was really offended by that.
Right.
And today I know, of course, they can't do that. But
sure.
It was good for a story.
It's such a funny way to phrase that. Listen to country. We know Garth Brooks here. Understand everything. Also, what is one place everyone should visit?
Can I say two? I love New York. I've had the best time in New York, New York City. And we did a reading there at the Flash Bomb. We did the Flash Bomb reading in New York at the it's a Russian what is it called, KGB bar, and that was just the most fun, and with a great group of writers mostly from New York and around there. In fact, one guy, Craig Fishbane, I'm going to call his name, he's one of the writers who does the Flash Bomb. And Craig he lives in New York, and he said, I went up to him after I had read and I introduced myself. We had seen each other on Zoom, but we'd never personally met. And he said, dang, Niles, I thought you were from England. He said, with a name like Niles Reddick, I just assumed you were British. And when you got on the stage, my jaw dropped open when you started to read in your accent. But anyway, and then I would say LA, because we had the best experience. I wrote 7 stories. Started 7 stories when I was in Los Angeles. Well, we stayed in Hollywood actually, but I I wrote 7 stories about that experience that I just thought was the most phenomenal. And I will tell you one of them. I met Matthew and his fiance, which is now his wife. And she is an actress, and so she's been in some films. Anyway, we met for dinner at a place called Little Dom's, which is right near the observatory. It's down the hill from the observatory. Right. We met them for dinner at Little Dom's, and it was me, my wife, Michelle, and my 2 teenagers at the time. And we're sitting in this little restaurant, and Matthew told me, he said, I promise you'll see somebody famous in this restaurant because it's one of those out of the way places that they like to go to. And so I go to the restroom, and I'm standing at the urinal. And this guy comes in, and he's got this kind of bleachy hair, white hair. It's not white like my hair. It's white, bleached white. Sure. Baseball cap. He's got all these tattoos. Really looked maybe even like a homeless guy, I think. But, and he starts talking to me, and he's next at the other urinal. I don't know, where I come from, you don't talk to people in the urinals. You go do your thing and then you leave, right? Right. And so I said hello, and, whatever he said, I can't remember. Right. So I left, and I go out, and I stepped almost in front of this young lady who had the most beautiful eyes I think I'd ever seen in my life. She was just a beautiful young woman, just incredible eyes. And I, kind of nodded or said hello, went back to the table. Matthew says to me, Niles, do you know who that is? And I said, I have no idea. He said, were you in the restroom with that guy? And I said, yeah, he was talking to me. It was kind of weird. Well, it turns out it's, oh my gosh, she was in all of these Transformer movies.
Oh, okay.
What was her name? And he was Machine Gun Kelly was his name.
Oh, funny. I think you're talking Megan Fox.
Megan Fox, that's right. And I didn't know who they were. And my kids were like, Dad, what do you mean you don't know who they are? And they're trying to tell me, and I'm like, I've never watched that. I've never heard that guy's music. Anyway, it was both incredibly fun, but at the same time, I felt so stupid because I had no idea who these people were. Yeah. That's not my generation, that's my kids' generation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I'm the worst too. I know that name, Machine Gun Kelly. I couldn't tell you what he looks like or what he does. And I did watch the first Transformers. I'm a kid from the 80s. So when the Transformers came out, I was, Transformers, G.I. Joe, or my afternoon cartoon jam. So, so I knew that one. So
it was a lot of fun. And I probably ran into other people that I didn't even know, in different places.
Right. Right. Awesome. So what is the best, worst excuse a student has ever given you?
Well, everybody's relatives have died several times.
Same relative keeps dying.
Dogs have eaten homework and all of that stuff. Papers have been lost in computers and, all of the ones that you hear about. There's not one that stands out. I find them all equally annoying.
I would like to give a student props though if they just kept saying the same relative died. Grandma Marley died again.
Yeah,
again.
One girl's grandma died 3 times that semester. Yeah, it's amazing. She must have been one of my former faculty members' patients who had 3 near-death experiences. Right?
Oh, right. Yep. There you go. There you go. And then what's the next one here? So what is an irrational fear and what's something you love irrationally?
I have an incredible fear of bridges. I get very nervous driving over bridges. Now, not small bridges. You know, in LA, all of your bridges are these little bridges. You know, there's really, I didn't see any big bridges. But in Florida, you know, we had some incredible long bridges, like 6 miles long, that go up. And, you know, I get very, kind of have a panic attack. My hands get sweaty. I have a hard time breathing. I don't know why, you know, that I get that way, but, and then I probably, I love Dolly Parton, you know, and that's irrational. I've met her once. She's a lovely person. I admire her ability to tell stories. She's a great storyteller.
Sure.
And the songs that I like that she did are mostly the ballads, you know, the stories that she's told in the songs. Much better than, say, Jolene. I don't particularly like Two Doors Down or Jolene or some of those songs.
Very good. And then last question for our stop here. Favorite podcast, and why is it Writers Drinking Whiskey?
I think because we've had a good time.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, I've done a lot of podcasts, and they're not nearly this fun.
Oh, good. Thank you for that. I love asking. Well, for one, it's self-serving, but I always I started asking people like favorite podcasts. The last times they do podcasts themselves, but there's ones they like, and it's you know, I like to cross-pollinate. And then I was like, because I like to do like double entendres and things like that. I was like, this should just be about this podcast. As you get to the reading would be great. Were you going to read from one of the two books? I wrote them down here because I didn't have them before. So you have the two new books that are out now, or Who's Going to Pray for Me Now and Forgiven. Were you going to read from one of those today?
Yeah, I think I'll read a couple of small pieces, flash pieces out of this book. And the cover art was done by a guy named Tom Liskey, who lives in Texas. It's a picture of a cemetery, an angel on a cemetery, a grave. And I look at his art quite frequently, and I saw that, and I wrote him and I said, Tom, I would love to have this as a cover, you know, for my newest book. And the book was published by Big Table Publishing. Robin Stratton is my editor. She lives in California, but they also have an office in Boston. And they're a small press, not a huge press, but I don't even know how many books a year they do. But I want to read to you, to everyone. I thought I would read the first story in the collection, which is titled Who's Going to Pray for Me Now? It was published, I don't remember where it was published, actually. It was published in Yellow Mama, but it's been published twice. And I'll have to put my glasses on to read this.
No problem.
I hope you like it. It was first published in Anti-Heroin Chic, and then Yellow Mama second publishing. It's more of I think, a Southern piece, and it's pretty much in first person. But anyway, let me read this.
Sure.
The deputy who called shared that you'd gone to the restroom to pee, that your jeans had fallen to your knees, that your arm and hand were outstretched and propped on the wall, a brace that didn't hold, unlike the spec homes you'd built for habitat after hurricanes along the Gulf. They said you couldn't go because your kidneys had stopped functioning and filtering, and within a short time, your heart stopped and you were gone. I wondered if that's what death was like, an incredible urge to pee and the sweet relief of finally going. I imagine you flew through that sheetrock and roof, looked back down on yourself, all hunched over with muscle turned to flab like a cicada shell stuck on the limb of a tree. After I wiped tears, the first thing that came to my mind was, who was going to pray for me now that you're gone? I remember that long ride to see you in Texas in Daddy's Ford LTD with the pop-up headlights and the fender skirts. I thought were so cool and didn't understand why car companies stopped making them, or the white wall tires that were hard to keep white. Daddy made me put white shoe polish on them when we couldn't get oil stains off. I remember Nana trying to act like riding in the back seat didn't bother her. And since she never drove and never trusted Daddy, and certainly didn't trust him after that car was passing others on our side and was headed straight for us, how she kept punching her floorboard with her foot from the back seat to stop, and how Daddy said, if they want to play chicken, I'll show them who the king of the road is. Daddy sped up until he sideswiped them, and we landed in a shallow bayou, an alligator swimming close to the front of the car, and Nana out cold because the iron skillet she had to bring, because I ain't going to scramble no eggs in a newfangled pan Joe bought from the Sears and Roebuck catalog. At first, we thought she was dead until we saw the iron skillet had slid off the back deck window and landed on her head. We only stayed a few days because y'all fought when drinking hard liquor. You a Chevy man and Daddy a Ford man who got mad when you said Ford stood for fix or repair daily. And the ride home was miserable because we were crammed in that Japanese compact. But it was the only rental Daddy could afford because his insurance didn't cover rentals. You and Daddy didn't talk much, and you didn't come to visit even when Nana died from that brain aneurysm. And you called and said you couldn't believe she was gone, that she was stubborn. Daddy was just like her, and it was her own fault because of that damn skillet she brought to Texas that knocked her out and later paved the way for her aneurysm. You thought it was ironic that Nana died quickly and at home, said she never got in another vehicle after she got back from Texas, walked to the grocery store and to appointments, and certainly wouldn't have gone to the hospital in an ambulance. I'm happy you quit drinking, got saved, and prayed for me every day. Sometimes I could feel those prayers like a gentle breeze giving me comfort from the blistering heat, the same way you described a breeze when you could still put asphalt shingles on a roof before you slipped and fell, broke your back, and had to take disability. I was happy you prayed for Daddy. And even though he only drinks Schlitz at night when he curses and damns everyone in Washington to hell, he still drinks Crown on the weekends and eats his eggs from Nana's skillet with the big spoon because he can't hold them on a fork because of tremors. I'm praying for him like you prayed for me, but it doesn't seem to take hold, and I'm hoping you find Nana and come for him when he takes his last sip, which may be soon, because if he curses me one more time while I'm over here on the sofa minding my own business, I may take that skillet to his head.
Yeah, I get the humor at the end there. People don't get the taking the skillet. I mean, that's on the darker side, but I really like that. I really love the image early on there of the cicada shell.
Oh, thank you.
Taking it going. That's a really powerful and very vivid. You know, you can really kind of see that and get the sense of the life after, you know, this one.
And this particular story is not true, of course. It's a fiction piece, but it was inspired by, I don't know where that voice came from, actually. But it just started coming, and I just ran with it, and it worked, you know. Sure. The story, I've lost a lot of aunts and uncles in the past few years, and, you know, some of them were very religious people who didn't have a lot to do in their life, but they prayed for people. You know, they just prayed for me or whoever. Mm-hmm. And that's what I thought, you know, when they all started dying off. Well, my God, who's going to pray for me now? Nobody else is praying for me, or if they are, they're not telling me. And so that voice just kind of came. And then the image, the old cars, you know, my family had some old cars like that. My dad was a car dealer. But my mother had gone with her great aunt and uncle and her grandmother to Texas once to visit family. And my great grandmother took that iron skillet and put it up on the back deck window, and it did. They had a wreck, and it came off and hit her in the head. and knocked her out, and they did think she was dead. And so my mother told me that story on the phone one weekend, and I thought, I'm going to put this in something. I don't know what. And then it just all came together, and that's how it worked. But I love that story, and it really fit as a title also for the collection. But if you're ready, I'll do another one for you.
Absolutely.
This one is a flash piece. It's called a drunk cedar waxwing, which is a bird. The bird flew right into the front glass door, and we heard a thump. I figured it was neighborhood boys who'd thrown a ball at the house again. By mistake, they'd squawk. The bird tried to move its wings, but couldn't take flight. What kind of bird is it? I asked. Robin said, it's a cedar waxwing. Must be flying drunk. She opened the door, squatted, and took it gently into her hands. Drunk? I've heard of pilots flying drunk, but not a bird. It's okay, pretty girl, she cooed. She stood and held the bird. They eat fermented berries, whole, and often get drunk. Usually they're in a flock, not alone. I remember a chimney swift bird getting into Nana's house when I was a teen. It had been startled, and because the chimney flue was open, it flew inside instead of out. Nana shrieked as if it were a mouse in her pantry or a snake in her lilies. And while she limped and hid behind the door of the kitchen, she directed me to open the back door to the patio and get the broom to scare and guide it out without hitting it. The sooty gray bird flew out, and within weeks I could hear her babies screeching in the chimney. With a few head shakes and flapping of its wings, the cedar waxwing took off, and I told Robin she should wash her hands. That's a very short piece, and that certainly never happened to us. But I read something about these birds that eat these berries and get drunk and fall out of the sky. And I thought, I've got to write about this in a way. And that particular piece was published in the London anthology, fiction anthology. I threw it into that contest and was a finalist with that. And then they published it in their anthology this year and invited me to London to read it, but nobody invited to pay for it. So I didn't go to London to read that. I would like to have gone. If I could have done that, I probably would have. I want to go to London. I've never been.
I thought you were from London.
Yeah, right. You and Craig Fishbane.
A theory on why humans like to drink, they call it the drunken monkey theory, because monkeys do that too. They find fermented fruits and they eat it and they kind of get drunk off of it. And so they're like, we might have been doing this like pre-evolution. Like this is like just something that kind of come with us.
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah. I wouldn't doubt that at all. That makes a lot of sense. Sure. And some people enjoy it so much they can't stop.
Right.
It turns into a problem.
Right, absolutely. It's funny you got both ends of it with the two stories there. You know, the fellow, I think it was the gentleman with that dies. He dies at the urinal, and because his liver won't process, anymore. And then you get the birds, falling out of the sky because they're too. Perfect for a show called Irish Drinking Whiskey. Now we got characters struggling with drinking.
That's right.
Very good. So, obviously, thanks so much for that. So, if people want to learn more about you, they could. I have a bug flying around me now, but where's the best place for them to go?
Well, I would say go to social media. I'm on Facebook daily and Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn, but I also have a website. It needs to be updated, apparently. I don't even think I've put my 2 new books on there yet. I just, when you're doing that all the time, you forget things.
Right.
But nilesreddick.com is certainly a place that people can go to.
Okay. Are the links to the social media on there?
On the
website?
I don't know. I think they are.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll definitely include the website on here, and then I'll try to throw a few of the links on the show description, as well. So people can grab you, but it sounds easy enough I'm sure everyone knows how to search nowadays too. So you can do that as well. And then, so I like to end the show by saying it's last call. You don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. The last question I like to ask everyone, not at all writing related, just is, if there's one piece of advice you'd give anyone watching, it could be something small, big, wherever you want to take it, what's one small thing they can do to make their lives just a little bit better?
Well, I would say not to let the personal feelings get in the way of the business of writing. It's a difficult business, and I would say don't give up. Keep trying. Find someone who can help you, and it will work out.
Sure. I think that's great advice almost in everything. If you get your personal feelings out,
it is.
What the goal is, and just move towards that goal, it'll always kind of work out better.
That's exactly right. And hey, if you would like to do a giveaway,
sure.
We can certainly give away some books. I've got 4 here, and I don't mind sending them to whoever wins. So
awesome.
I don't know how you do that, but if you want to do that, that's perfectly fine too.
No, that would be awesome. So what I'll do, so we will definitely do a giveaway with it. I'm trying to think of what's the best way to get people to enter. So one way for sure, if you're watching the video, leave us a comment down there. Comment anything you want. Leave a comment. Make sure there's a way. I should be able to find you from there and send to you. I actually have, because you brought up Matt earlier, Matthew Kaye. We did those first live version of Writers Drinking Whiskey just 2 weekends ago now. He had come over. We actually did it here. We had a bartender and things. And so we did a bunch of raffles and things. So that was easy enough for people live. And then we had, we put, raffle tickets in. But if you watch this, for sure comment. I'm trying to think if I can include some of the other social medias. I'll put a post out. But yeah, that'd be great. We can do that. And I have the little, if I can get it without knocking everything over. I did it. So actually, this is the little dauber we have here. So
like the lottery.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do the lottery on it. And so anyone that comments, I'll throw your username down in here. And I'll find something for folks that are on Facebook and the TikTok and the Twitters and so forth. So,
and I'll send that out too as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. So we'll definitely do that. So yeah, definitely hit us up. It'd be well worth your time. Awesome. So we got that. We got everything. My last note here, it's not actually on the paper, but I'm going to pretend it is I really want to thank you for your time, your graciousness coming on. It was really an honor to spend the time with you and getting to hear you to read live and talk about writing and your life and everything else. And our UFO rabbit hole, that's always like, I'm an unsolved mysteries kid. That's actually perfect for me.
If I see one, I'm going to let you know.
Absolutely. Oh, please do. I'll let you know too. I love all things. I'm just a very curious guy generally, but I love all things like that. Especially.
I don't know if you watch Ancient Aliens, and I also watch William Shatner.
Explain
mysteries. I've been watching him. It amazes me that he's 90 years old.
It is
still doing that kind of thing. That's incredible.
It is incredible. Yeah, he's an incredible guy. So yeah, both of those are fine. I love all of those things. I like to turn them on, and then if I'm doing submitting things like that, to where you can kind of I can't write with any words or anything on, but if it's just kind of more the administrative stuff, some of the stuff I'm doing for the show, I always turn those on, and Alaska Triangle, whatever else.
I love the Alaska. I love the Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
Thing.
That's a good one too. Yeah. Awesome.
Wow.
Well, thanks so much again.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Bill. And let's stay in touch.
Extra shot. You should have expected it at this point, because I've been doing it for 16 episodes, or whatever number it might be. Question for the audience. Thanks so much for staying with us. If you want to get one of Niles's books, make sure you leave us a comment. And the best comment would be the extra shot question. So this question today would be, what does your hometown mean to you? That hometown could be, area, it can be the South, it can be your city, whatever, however you think of it. Please let us know down there in that comment box. You'll be entered into the raffle for Niles' book. And you'll hear from me because, I like to respond to them. I just sit lurking the YouTube ethereal all day and all night. That's all I do. Thanks again so much for watching. And again, as always, the best way to support the show, if you would so choose to, pick up a book, from one of, me, any of the great writers we have on here. We would appreciate it. And it helps a long way to pushing writing, forward. Hopefully, again, get this literature art needs to be more popular, and drinking while you participate. So thanks so much again. Stay softly, stay sane if that's your thing. And cheers.